No nonsense this week, Clyde. We're jumping right in. This is Survivor Analytics, Cook Islands, Episode 4. I'm the voice of the people. My name's Jack. With me, as always, the true expert. Say hi, Clyde, and then I'm getting right into it.
What's up, party people? Let's jump in.
Right up at the top of the episode, this isn't that fun. We're not doing a fun bit here. They come back from the vote, and Becky starts talking about how her alliance members have recommitted to the alliance. Was this a thing in this era or the earlier eras of Survivor where people would form alliances short term? This is the Becky, Yul, Jonathan alliance, right? There was no talk of this being a short-term thing, but she completely talks about it in this moment right at the top of the episode as if it is a short-term, it has to be renewed, like a tag at the DMV.
I think it's almost the opposite, where in old school Survivor, alliances last longer. It's a less dynamic game. So I think when Becky says that, she's saying that the vote confirmed the alliance because that was the first time that group worked together. And we see that group kind of solidify here, but we got that taken care of with Becky out of the gate. I'm sure everyone that was tuning into the podcast wanted no nonsense, right to the Becky content, the most charismatic character of the entire season. Forget about Yul, forget about Parvati, forget about Jonathan. They care about Becky.
This is a serious show, goddammit. This is the Werner Herzog of Survivor podcasts. We are no nonsense, reflecting on the mortality of the human race. Because what is Survivor if not a microcosm for life and death? What was your impression of the episode as a whole?
My impression, I wrote down more mid. This is the second episode in a row that I'm not a fan of. I think I said this at the start of the season, but I feel like production does not know how to handle a 20-person cast.
Yeah.
Once again, I feel like the same characters are getting screen time while others are completely left in the dust. And if you compare this to a season like China, by the time we got 4 episodes into China, I had a good sense of the different characters on the island, and I cared more about the collection of people there. At this point in the season, I think I care about maybe 5 or 6 of the players total, and the rest of them mean nothing to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty fair. Just for an example, right? Somebody is sent off to Exile Island at the end of last episode, or near the end of last episode. She comes back in the first 3 minutes of this one. We never see anything about her time there.
Oh, for Candace.
Candace is sent away, comes back. I did, when I saw her come back, think, oh, Christine. So that mental link is still in my brain. In this episode, after the reward challenge, Adam is sent to exile. Adam comes back. Nothing. Absolutely no fanfare. Like, there's too much going on between the massive cast and the gimmicks and just the amount of happening around camp, right? That they've basically decided to commit to a couple of storylines and let everybody else completely fall by the wayside.
Yep. And we're, a third of the way through the season now? It's around a 13-episode season. I don't know. There's just so many non-factors here for me. I'm not trying to start on a negative note, even though this is the serious episode for us. But I said before we started that I'm not particularly high on Cook Islands, and it's lived up to my expectations so far, where you have a couple of lead episodes. We had the Billy Garcia episode, Chef's Kiss to Billy. But outside that, have there been any amazing votes or character moments from this early pre-merge that you'll look back on fondly?
I'm loving the challenges. I'll say that.
Yeah, but you love the challenges in every old school season. That's not specific to this one.
But in terms of Survivor voting dynamics or good tribals, really does feel like we're going to get a couple more weeks in, and then it's going to feel like the game has really started, right?
Yeah, I'm already looking forward to the merge, and the merge doesn't really feel that close.
No.
After this episode, we're down to, 16?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a big cast. I guess they had to do it with the premise. Let me ask you this, without giving anything away, for whenever we get to those seasons. This is season 13, Cook Islands. Seasons 12 and 14, how many cast members did they have?
I think 12 had 16, if I remember correctly, because 12 organizes them by age and gender. So they have younger women, younger men, older men. And I think each of those tribes has 4 players instead of 5. I would need to go back and check. But I know for a fact that season 14 is one of the few seasons that has an odd number of starting players. They start with 19 contestants instead of 20.
I mean, I guess this is why it's the experimental era, right? And they're kind of dialing in the formula, which is fine. Like, I get it. It has to happen, right? You're not going to get it right away. But 20 seems like too much. And the fact that we're 4 episodes in and people still show up on camera, and I'm like, who is that? Right? Like, there's a woman on Raro.
Is it Jenny? Jenny gets some screen time this week.
Maybe it's Jenny. I don't know. She showed up in the background of like a shot as Stephanie was talking. And I was like, who is this?
Yeah, it's either Jenny or Christina.
Oh, maybe it's Christina. That might be why I don't know her name, is because of my whole Christina Candace thing. Okay, so let's get into the meat of this because, you know, I feel like there's a few things we can knock out pretty quick. Right off the bat, after Tribal, Ozzy is not in a good mood. He says, you know what? Screw it. My best alliance is gone after that last vote. I hope they vote me out quick because I'm tired of catching all the food for everybody. That's what he says at night. And I'll just jump ahead here because it's a little thing that happens after the reward challenge.
Yeah.
He catches 9 fish and he calls himself the provider. He loves being the provider. He says, this is my selling point to the tribe. This is why they'll keep me around, is because I'm the provider. And so all it took was a single win, and he's completely gone 180 on his outlook, right? I really think Ozzy is the most temperamental player we've seen in a while because it feels like every single thing that happens shifts him from I'm done to let's go, I'm winning the game.
Yeah, he's temperamental and he's old school. Like, he treats Survivor like it's 2001. All the time, he hops in confessional. I swear 90% of Ozzy's confessionals up until this point are related to the fish. He talks more about fishing and aquatic life. He would have loved your segment last week on the octopus, but he talks more about those than he does the actual alliances in the game. Even going back to the whole Billy Garcia situation, he doesn't target Billy because he doesn't trust Billy. He targets Billy because Billy doesn't help out around camp.
Right.
For all the talk around camp life and providing for the tribe, I don't get the sense that anyone else really buys into this philosophy. When Ozzy catches the 9 fish, he's applauded. Yule calls him Aquaman, I think.
They call him Poseidon.
Poseidon, that's what it is. But we never see anyone go in confessional and say, we need to keep Ozzy around because he's the one providing all the fish. Like, they appreciate the gesture, but that doesn't seem to hold a lot of weight to the rest of the group.
Yeah, I mean, I think to go back to they don't know what to do with 20 people, we don't get a lot of confessionals where people are talking about anybody, right? The only times we really get confessionals are if Cowboy does something crazy or if it's directly related to somebody whose name will be written down.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a formula that we can really rely on, even early on in this season.
And would you say with the Ozzy edit so far, do you think he's portrayed more as like a heroic figure, a villainous one, or is he pretty neutral at this point?
Early on, he got a little bit of a villainous edit. He was being portrayed as kind of this devious player, but that went away really fast. And if you take the average, it's neutral because he gets these highs and lows, considering how much coverage he gets.
I can tell you the public perception at the time that this season aired was that Ozzy was the hero of the I2 tribe. And partially that's a sign of the times where I feel like the fan base then would favor the Meat Boy more so than they would today.
The good old days, as I call them.
So I knew that going into the season. So I was expecting Ozzy to get this very optimistic edit, and it hasn't really matched up to his reputation so far.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't call him the hero. And then Candace comes back from Exile Island, and we have this conversation about people start asking her why she would be picked, right? And she plays dumb. She thinks it's because her former tribe mates were protecting her. That's kind of it.
That's basically it with Candace. I'm getting the sense, and you tell me what you think about this, I get the vibe that Candace still feels more tied to Parvati and Adam than she does to this new alliance with Becky, Yule, and Jonathan.
I would agree because she missed everything they did.
Yeah, well, she was still there when the alliance formed before she went to exile, but it seems like her heart remains with the white people.
That is what it is. You're right. I mean, I think it is, but yes, she was there when the alliance was formed. All the work they did on that vote was done after she left and before she came back, right? Everything consequential about the alliance happened without her so far. And so while she's in it, she doesn't really have a stake in the game or much experience.
Yeah, and that experience is really important. I bet actually working through a vote together and having that achievement as a group does a lot to bring people together. And that's something that Candace just lacks. Like, she's probably on the outside of that alliance, but she's still a part of it right now. Anything else with I2? You want to talk a little bit about Rero before the reward challenge?
I mean, Rero is the Meat Boy tribe. We've got, it feels like a scene out of Barbie that was cut, right? We've got the ladies being responsible and smart and contributing to the tribe. And then we've got all the dudes shirtless, flexing for the camera while they don't do anything. It's an I'm just Ken situation to the extreme. The ladies are like, wow, the guys really aren't doing anything. And then we cut to the guys, and I don't remember who said it, but one of them goes, do you think the women mind that we're not contributing? Nah, it's cool. Don't worry, bro, we're strong.
They dap each other up one more time.
Like, literally, the only thing they've done to burn calories is dap each other up. And that's kind of the tone, is they need us. We are much stronger than I2. Look at our dudes. We've all got muscles. Not all of their dudes have muscles. We'll win every challenge. It'll be great. And I'm thinking, fantastic. Meat Boy tribe. Like,
you were on the Meat Boys side. You're like, this is a great idea. They should be off on the road, not helping at all.
I'm not thrilled with their lack of contribution, but I am hoping that this Meat Boy alliance carries to the Final Four, and we only have these dudes at the end.
What would a good Final Four challenge be for a strictly Meat Boy group?
No, it's a memory challenge. Like, they get to the end, it's been all physical challenges, and then Jeff says, all right, memorize the name of every island in the Cook Islands and put them on a map.
I could say with this group, yes, it's annoying that they're not helping out around camp, but what's more annoying for me as a strategic viewer is that the Meat Boys on the Rero tribe cannot count.
No.
They seem to think that they'll be safe, even if things go wrong and they go to tribal council, that no one would vote out one of these 4 Meat Boys. But in a group of 9, they're in the minority, and none of them seem to even bother to pull one of the women over, except for Nate. Like, we'll talk about the Nate Parvati conversation later on, but it seems like Nate is distancing himself more from the Meat Boys and actually trying to pull Parvati in. It's another instance of like just old school Survivor at its core, where people don't seem to think just one step ahead. They're focused solely on the next thing presented to them in the game, which in this case is the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, they are on a one-track Meat Boy mind. And who can fault them, right? Who needs to care about math, Clyde? Don't laugh. This is the serious podcast. Who needs to care about math when we're going to win every challenge? It doesn't matter. The vibes are going to carry us, right?
Well, here's a question. Do you think if Ozzy was on the Rero tribe that he would go along with the Meat Boy philosophy? Because he wants to help out around camp.
I think he'd probably get frustrated with it.
He's not like the other Meat Boys. He's different.
Just a quick point. Rarotonga and Aitutaki are the 2 most populated islands in the Cook Islands.
Oh, okay.
I looked up a list of the Cook Islands while you were talking. There are 10,000 people, almost 11,000 people on Rarotonga, and almost 2,000 on Aitutaki. And none of the other islands have more than 500 people.
Okay, that explains the tribe swap then. Because last week I criticized them to reducing the tribes to Rero and Aitu.
What were the other 2 called?
It was Hiki and Puka. And I thought they should have included Puka in the tribe swap because Puka remained fully intact pre-swap. But since those are the 2 most populous, it makes a bit more sense.
So Puka is the 4th most populous, and Hiki is the 8th most populous, is Manihiki.
So whatever the third most populous island is kind of got screwed over by production.
That's Mangaya. So I don't think they could think of a good, it didn't sound tribal enough.
Well, maybe that could be the merged tribe name.
It very well could be. We'll have to keep an eye out for that. Challenge?
Yeah, let's jump to reward.
All right, reward challenge. They're playing for warmth, comfort, and getting to send somebody to exile. For as much as Survivor production is working exile into the game, they are not showing it at all. And they've also dropped the pretense at this point of there's a twist that will be revealed after the challenge, right? The first couple challenges, it was, there's an envelope and I'm going to open it and say exile. What could it be? And this one, he said, Jeff says it right off the top of the bat. Decent challenge here. Quick little breakdown. 2 tribe members are attached to a rope. The rest of their tribe has to pull and push them through an obstacle course. At the end of the obstacle course, somebody has to go dive into the ocean, retrieve a decoder ring that looks like a ship's wheel, and first tribe to decode a code wins. I liked the puzzle being a little more complicated than a modern puzzle. I liked the diving. The only other thing I have to note here is that as I2 is pulling their tribe members through the puzzle,
I wrote this down too.
Cowboy seems to have absolutely no regard for the physical well-being of the 2 members chained to the rope. He's like, don't worry about her. We'll give her a pillow when we win. It's basically what he says. Somebody does get hurt, I think, mildly, right? Because at one point, the rope goes under some sand, and they literally have to pull someone by her legs. I think it's Christine, actually.
There is no Christine.
Candace, actually.
Oh, Candace.
He gets Candace. The only other thing to note is Rero goes pretty far behind. Tempers flare. There's some relatively irate shouting at one another, and I2 wins.
Yeah, congrats to I2. I feel like this challenge really presents the good and evil sides of Cowboy. He fluctuates between the two in every single episode. We'll talk about it more later on with the whole bird situation. Even last week, what did he say about like the deceit of man?
Yeah, he's tired of the deceit of man, or doesn't want to be involved with the deceit of man, something like that.
He has these moments where he is so against the premise of Survivor, and he doesn't want to do anything to hurt anybody else. And then you fast forward to the challenge, and he's throwing the girls over the beams without any regard for their health. So regarding the Exile Island twist, I'll say I'm kind of over it. Yeah, I'd be okay if they cut Exile for the rest of the season, unless they introduce a new idol on that island, because it just feels like something that they throw into every challenge now without any real consequence.
Well, I think the potential of consequence for Exile Island at this stage, right, for the reward, it feels totally useless, because whoever is sent at reward, Adam is sent, comes back before the immunity challenge. If you're sent to exile after the immunity challenge, you're being protected from the vote, right? That's has some interesting dynamic potential. Worth noting, nobody goes to exile after immunity this week.
So they just changed the rules of exile week to week, I guess.
Yeah, so the only interesting thing that can be done with it, they decide not to do.
Well, I think the optimal exile rule would be you get sent after reward and you return after the immunity challenge, but before tribal council. That way there's some form of consequence where you could knock out a physical player for the immunity challenge, but then you're also not giving them a free pass to survive a tribal. Like, I think that's kind of overpowered.
And I get it's experimental era, right? I'm willing to write off a whole bunch of stuff to the time.
But I still want to see something from Adam, even if it's him digging in the sand and being frustrated and flexing his muscles with the sun beaming down on him as he gets sunburned. Like, something in the story regarding exile would be beneficial here. Let's go to Rero post-reward, where we have a new dictator sitting on the throne.
The comfy king.
It's JP, who starts to give out orders around camp, which rubs other players the wrong way. Now, I've seen this archetype a million times before on Survivor. You'll always have the bossy person. We saw Dave Cruiser on Survivor China. We saw Russell Swan to a degree on Survivor Samoa. And now JP is taking the reins and following in those elite footsteps. I will say, I don't think JP's actions here are too egregious. I think when it comes down to it, if you're a strong social player and people like you, they don't mind you making requests around camp.
Yeah, but I don't think people like him.
That's the core of my argument, is that they already didn't like him. So then once he starts making these requests, it lowers their opinion of him even more.
Yeah, because if, a friend of yours says, hey, can you grab my water or my machete or whatever? Yeah, of course. Here you go. If your enemy, if you have somebody you're not crazy about and they ask you to do something even remotely inconvenient or even convenient, I hate doing stuff for people I don't like. Like sometimes that happens, in other walks of life, or sometimes, a co-host says, hey, you have to watch the episode before you record the podcast. And I'm like, oh, God.
Can you believe this guy?
We haven't seen anything endearing from him. He starts kind of mansplaining how to put something on the fire. He asks Parvati to walk past him to get the machete that's 6 feet away from him. It's a lot of little things that do add up. But at the same time, as Parvati digs her fangs into Nate, she doesn't seem too worried about JP as a true threat. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. I never got the vibe that JP was the type of leader that actually riled the group behind him. He was more of a figurehead from the beginning. At this point in the episode, was the light bulb starting to go off in your head saying that, oh, JP could be going home this week?
I don't really think about who's going to go home until after the challenge.
You're just so focused on the challenge. You're the meat boy. You're like, bring me to the challenge next, and then we'll worry about the vote.
I'm not going to worry about predictions if that tribe is going to end up winning the challenge. I'm paying more attention to the dynamics. And the dynamics I noticed were Parvati getting in more and more with Nate. She finds out, yep, the Kens have an alliance. But Nate says, don't worry, we're above that. Our bond is stronger than the bond of boys, and which is good for Parvati. And she and Nate essentially have a conversation saying, yeah, JP could go at a moment's notice, but she is willing to wait and essentially let him, I didn't write it down, something along the lines of let him be king while he wants to be.
And with this whole segment between Parvati and Nate, I think it's really funny to see their confessionals in terms of how they perceive each other. Parvati's very upfront in the sense that I'm going to flirt with Nate to get as much information as possible, whereas Nate seems to be actually catching feelings for Parvati at this point in the season.
You can't blame him.
She's great at what she does. It's really a continuation of last week, just highlighting Parvati's game. And I think she's one of the few players on the island right now that's successfully playing both sides, where it seems like she has the connection to the men through Nate, and she is well liked by the rest of the women on Raro.
Shall we go over to I2?
Yeah, let's go to I2. We have an animal shot.
Before the show, we discovered that both you and I have segments about this scene.
Yeah.
Of Cowboy abusing animals. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I'll let you go first. I have my own spin on the entire segment.
So, Cowboy sees a nest up in a tree, bird sitting on a nest, and goes, oh, I'd like to get eggs for the tribe. Climbs up the tree, knocks the nest out of the tree. And as the nest falls, we see a baby fall out. At least one. There might be multiple, but at least one. Jonathan finds it. It's alive, thankfully, unhurt, hopefully. And they try to put the nest back, and it's upsetting, right? It's a shame. However, I did take it upon myself to figure out what kind of bird that was.
Oh,
Clyde, meet Sula Sula, the red-footed booby. Sula Sula, of course, being its Latin name. There are 3 subspecies. We can assume pretty safely that this is the Sula Sula rubripes, the Pacific and Indian Ocean subspecies. Or it might be the Websteri if it's East Central Pacific. But the red-footed booby is the smallest member of the booby and gannet family. Average weight is around 2 pounds. Red legs, interesting coloration. I believe this is what it is, right? I did a bit of research. It was challenging. Let me say that.
Yeah, what does the research look like? Does this involve you going on Google Images and just trying to match it that way, or do you look it up specifically online?
I pulled up a list of birds on the Cook Islands. I Googled cowboy bird scene, which auto-corrected to cowboy bird scene. And so I saw some pictures of cowboy birds wearing cowboy hats. I ended up using the Google image, like camera search with some search terms.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure it's a red-footed booby. If you look closely, the feet do look a little red. It looks kind of like this, right? I feel pretty good about it.
yeah. Was there some rewinding for you? Did you have to check the tape again?
I went back after the episode to do this.
Oh, okay.
So I did this like a half hour ago. Normally they do lay one egg at a time. So that is hopefully good, right? Hopefully only one fell. But the birds take a long time to fly and the babies take a long time to fly. So hopefully that bird was okay, but I doubt it.
Wait, why not? Why do you think it's not okay?
A lot of times, a lot of birds, if they fall out of a tree and a human handles them, it can throw off the scent, and parent birds will not be as nurturing of their young after they've been handled.
So you're saying the Jonathan scent is what will ruin the rest of that bird's life?
The Jonathan scent and the fact that the nest is damaged and the mom is traumatized by there's a whole lot of stuff that went wrong here. Yeah, not a fan of Cowboy here. Jonathan's pretty upset. And you know what? I was kind of upset too. Unnecessarily cruel to animals.
I've always said that if Survivor ever gets taken off the air, it'll be because of one of two things. One is that if a contestant literally dies on the show. I think if that happens, CBS cuts it entirely, which has happened before on an international version of Survivor, not the US version. Somebody has passed away on the show before from a heart attack.
On what version?
The Bulgarian version, I think. So I think that's one way the show goes off the air. The other way is if there's some major like animal or ecological issue where the contestants interfere with the ecosystem there and people say, we can't be doing this anymore.
The contestants burned down an island on Fiji.
Something like that. Well, they used to burn down the campsite before they left the island, and I don't think they do that anymore.
What's your segment here?
So,
buddy,
for the past year, Jack, you've given me many animal shot segments where you take an animal scene and compare it to another player on the cast. And after a year of studying this, I felt inspired. So I have my own animal shot sequence for this bird segment.
Oh boy.
Which obviously represents the love between Candace and Billy. You have your bird nest and the baby bird, which symbolizes the love between those two. It's young, it's pure, it's innocent. You have Cowboy, who actually represents a player standing below the nest in Ozzy. He's the disruptor. You have the stick, used to knock down the nest, which obviously represents the tribal council and the voting slips themselves. And finally, we have Jonathan, or the viewer, which represents us watching Ozzy destroy love right in front of us on our television. So
no,
I took a lot away from your numerous animal shots throughout the past year, and I hope that I lived up to your expectations.
It's not how it works. It's not. We agreed this was the serious episode.
What do you mean? This is a serious topic.
I brought Latin names, and you're like, oh, let's talk about Billy some more.
That'll be my goal, is to find a way to insert Billy into every episode moving forward.
Clearly, you thought it out, and you know what? Maybe there's something there. I mean, there obviously isn't, but you did find a parallel.
It would have been easier if Ozzy was the one that hit the bird nest down, because then you can make the clear connection of Ozzy disrupts nature and he disrupts true love. It's a little bit more difficult when it's Cowboy.
All right, segment's done. Do you have anything else before the challenge?
Nah, that's all I got.
All right. This immunity challenge is one of my favorite challenges they've ever done on the show.
Better than T-ball? Better than bowling?
Why are you asking questions to which the answer is obviously no?
Oh, okay. So outside the backyard games,
T-ball top, bowling second.
They did bocce ball, right?
Oh, they did bocce. There's the Ninja Stars on China. There's a lot of great challenges, but this is easily a top 10 challenge for me, I would say. It's themed. It's a fake rescue. Each tribe has to assemble a stretcher puzzle, run through the woods, rescue a tribe member who is shackled to a mast, pretty awesome, out in the water, swim back to shore, put that person on a stretcher, run back through the forest, build a fire, and in a foreshadowing for many years to come, they have to build a fire to cut a rope. First fire to break the rope wins. Once again, I2 wins out. The Meat Boys have not won a challenge since I started paying attention to them as the Meat Boys.
Well, this is another Meat Boys-centric challenge that I expected them to win. Like, this feels like one where you have a clear damsel in distress that you need to, quote-unquote, save and then bring back to shore. I don't think they would run something like this in the modern day, especially because a large chunk of it isn't even a team challenge. I think the part that takes the longest here is the swim out to get the damsel and then bring them back.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of individual pieces to this, which I like, right? You can have different tribe members taking on different skills. It makes for a more well-rounded experience than even the previous challenge.
Cowboy eats it up at the fire building segment. He starts taking the coconut husk and swirling it around beforehand. I couldn't tell if that was a part of his routine or if it was like an early celebration because he was that confident that they would win. I will note that it's weird seeing fire making as a part of a Survivor challenge because I'm so used to it being a part of tribal council.
Right.
Fire making is still in the rules at this point in Survivor history. The first fire making challenge that we get in a tribal council happens in season 10. So it's still on the board at some point down the line that they could reintroduce fire making if there's a tied vote later in the game. But that's really all I got for the challenge. I'd say between this challenge and the reward, I liked this one slightly more, just because of the fire component.
And Stephanie on Raro feels as though she has lost the challenge. So when we go back to camp and Stephanie says in confessional, I feel like I'm the weakest link. And then we cut back to the camp and she says, hey, everybody, I feel like I'm the weakest link. You don't have to say things. It's very frustrating when stuff like this happens.
It's essentially Stephanie putting a target on her back, which also doesn't make sense because Stephanie was not the sole person making fire there. There were two other people contributing to that cause. I think I wrote it down. It was, let's see. Stephanie, Jenny, and Rebecca were all on fire making duty. So I would understand that a bit more if it was only Stephanie in that slot, and then she goes back and says, hey guys, that was my bad. But as far as I'm concerned, Stephanie should be saying, we each deserve 1/3 of the responsibility here for losing the challenge. But then we start getting some strategic plans going around. One of them is the obvious Stephanie elimination, because she threw herself under the bus.
I'll say this. We see this conversation, and it's Nate, JP, and somebody else.
It's them talking to Rebecca and Christina, I think.
Rebecca and Christina. And they basically say, hey, let's just send her home. She doesn't want to be here. They sort of agree to just tell her, be upfront, hey, we're going to vote you out because you don't want to be here. And then JP walks away and goes to take a nap. And at that moment, I knew JP was going home.
After that convo, the women get together and they have a big realization, which is Stephanie doesn't actually want to quit the game.
Yeah.
And they realize we can make something happen here. We can bring all the women together. The difficulty is that there's only 4 women on board. They have Stephanie, Rebecca, Christina, and Jenny. 4 women who I feel like have not held a lot of screen time thus far in the season. So I'm happy that they're getting to play a role in the edit.
And to be honest, they still don't really.
The focus is more on who they will pick up as their 5th more than anything else.
They decide, all right, we've got the 4 of us. We need somebody else. The first idea is, this is about the ladies. Let's get Parvati. And then they say, wait a minute, Parvati will tell the guys. But they still tell her. And she's sort of, she wants to think about it, right? She doesn't commit. We also don't see her telling anybody else, right? The edit might be a little slim here because we spent so much time on Cowboy's animal abuse. But we see Parvati essentially playing the middle, but not playing up anything else, right? Like she's not trying to make a move of her own here. She's just uncommittal, non-committal. But then the ladies decide, in case Parvati isn't down, and in case she tells the guys, let's just bring in a guy anyway. And they bring in Brad. And this is where I think what you were talking about earlier with the lack of screen time for so many of these people, Brad comes in and all of a sudden Brad and Stephanie have this whole bond.
They're besties out of nowhere.
They're besties out of nowhere, but it feels so unearned. Hey, we have this ladies' alliance. We're going to take out a guy, and we're going to pull in a guy to do it, seemingly at random.
12 hours earlier, Brad was with the other guys questioning if they should actually be helping out around camp. Like, in my mind, he was fully in the Meat Boys group until that moment where they pull him over. And he seems receptive to the idea. And I think the edit could have used just a couple segments earlier in the episode that either A, showed some distrust between Brad and JP, or B, showed Brad connecting with the woman in some capacity.
Any capacity. Any at all.
Because within that group, you have Jenny, who was a part of the Puka tribe with Brad. So that's a relationship that we could have highlighted in the pre-merge instead of Cowboys racist comments for the 50th time, right? That's really all I had going into Tribal Council. I could say that going in, I felt pretty confident in the JP elimination. It was just a matter of who will be the one to actually flip. Will this be a 5-4 vote? Will Parvati commit? It was really just a matter of where the numbers would fall in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, and the tribal itself is pretty generic. A couple of things to note. Jeff is disappointed in the Meat Boy tribe. At one point, somebody, and I apologize, I'm not sure who, maybe it was Jenny, says, wow, Jeff, you're really grilling us, huh? And he's like, it's a game for $1 million, and one of you's going home, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of how you're feeling. Yeah, I'm grilling you. Like, he's very stern. And after the vote is read, he says something along the lines of, like, hopefully you guys have a path forward because things aren't looking good. Jeff wants the Meat Boys to win, especially back in this era, right? Jeff is a Meat Boy fundamentalist, and the fact that they're failing drives him nuts, clearly. I have nothing else of note from Tribal. Like, it's pretty generic.
The only other note from Tribal is that Jeff asks his typical question, which is, who's the leader of the tribe?
Yeah.
He's trying to get that sweet gossip from the rest of them. Jenny calls out JP as the leader, but he will only be the leader for so long. I'll also say that JP claims that this vote is the hardest one of the season for him personally. I guess JP and Stephanie had some form of connection, but I don't think there's a single scene the two of them hanging out at any point. So your final vote is 7 on JP, 2 on Stephanie. How did we end up with 7 votes on JP here? The only votes against Stephanie came from JP himself and Nate, which is also wild because I would assume if Parvati's in on the plan, she has this connection with Nate, she'll tell him beforehand.
Oh, see, here's how I'm seeing that, right? After Tribal, Nate goes to Parvati. Babe, why didn't you tell me we're voting this way? And she goes, oh, listen. And she'll, like, pat him on the back in kind of a flirty way. I just knew the ladies were going to vote, and I didn't want to, if it went awry, I didn't want to blow up your spot with the dudes because I know you want to keep that alliance. I think she can frame it to him as a, we're still tight, but we're on the down low. That's my theory, right? Is Parvati is in such a good spot with him that she doesn't have to confer with him on everything.
I agree that she can earn back his trust. I have a theory on why she excluded Nate, and it's that she wants to break up the potential connection between Nate and Stephanie because the two of them were together on the Hiki tribe.
Yeah.
So there could be a concern there for Parvati that for me to stay close to Nate, I need to cut his other options. So through this vote, I can knock out a Meat Boy that he's aligned with and destroy a connection to his original tribe, so he's more dependent on me. That might be me giving Parvati too much credit. She might have just said, I don't feel like telling him because it's season 13, right? I think there is a chance that there's some more strategic thought going on there behind the scenes.
So final vote, 7-2.
JP's out. Do you think JP comes back in a future season?
No. There's what, 4 returning players?
There's 5 on this cast.
5. I know who the 5 are.
You already know who the 5 are?
Yeah, it's Ozzy, Parvati, Cowboy, Flicka, and Yule.
What about Christine?
I don't think there's a Christine on this cast. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure there's not.
If you threw Christine in the 5, I'd be so happy.
I'm not convinced there's not a Christine. I'll say that.
You are correct. JP does not return for a future season. I looked up some information on JP afterwards. He entered like a modeling career after the show, so he's doing A-okay. But just not within the game of Survivor. You want to go to winners and losers?
Yeah, I wonder if we'll have an eclipse here. I feel like we might have the same winner, but not the same loser.
If we have an eclipse, it'll be our third consecutive eclipse of the season.
I feel like if we hit a certain threshold of eclipses, we need to add somebody else to the podcast who doesn't know any Survivor. Like, we need a newer voice of the people.
What? You're saying you lost the title?
Like, if we start thinking the same too many times in a row, I feel like we need some fresh meat in here, or we need to get a guest for an episode or something to mix it up, because I'm getting too smart.
Yeah, that's the issue. If you read our Apple Podcast reviews, it's 1 stars saying Jack is too smart for his own good.
Anyway, who's your winner?
Winner is Parvati. Do you have Parvati as well?
My winner is also Parvati. It's hard to not give her the winner when she's the only one establishing strong roots.
She has strong roots. She's playing the middle. I considered giving it to someone like Jenny or Stephanie because they seemed more integral parts of the women's alliance that made this move happen.
Yeah.
But I just think Parvati's better positioned on that tribe moving forward. Who's your loser then?
My loser is Candace.
Who?
Christine.
Oh, okay. Wait, why Candace? She was invisible this week.
I'm so glad you asked. Christine went to Exile Island, missed out on her alliance's closest vote, right? Biggest move. She comes back. She has people grilling her. Why did you get sent? It's the only time anybody seems to care about somebody being sent or chosen to go to Exile Island. She doesn't give a great answer. She plays dumb. She doesn't seem to be doing anything else, right? And I just feel like that underlying thought that enough people in her tribe have that she has relationships going into the merge will come around to be a problem for her. And I didn't want to write down Cowboy again.
He's your perpetual loser. You've given him the loser only once this season so far.
People just dislike him so much that on an old era of Survivor, I'm not convinced that, I mean, he could be a great GOAT, right? But I'm not convinced that people in this era will see him that way.
That's fair. I don't know. I just don't know if there's anybody on I2 outside of Candace's alliance that I would expect to flip a vote on her in the future because of this entire exile twist. If someone's going to target Candace because of this whole situation, it would probably be like a Yule or a Becky or a Jonathan, but all of them are working with Candace. Like, do you really see Flicka or Cowboy or Sundra pulling that off against her?
I see Flicka because Flicka's the one who keeps bringing it up, where Candace is clearly still in with the whites, right? Flicka has moved on. And so I think Flicka could keep bringing that up. I think that could be the grit in the works for her that sticks, and she just fixates on it.
I think Ozzy could pick up on it as well, but only if Candace catches a fish and brings it back to Adam and Parvati on the other tribe. Then he would notice and say, wait a second, other people are contributing to camp life? Maybe we should get rid of Candace now. That is a fair take overall. I do think she didn't handle that situation great, but we also never saw anyone's perspective on Candace after her lies. Like, we don't know if people bought into her cluelessness. My loser is Nate, who has yet to vote correctly in a single tribal council this season. He's 0 for 2 so far. He was left out of the Sekou vote, and he was now left out of the JP vote. I think he could be in a solid spot moving forward as Parvati's puppet, but I don't think he's making the best strategic decisions for his game in the long run. Like, he's cutting his options with the Meat Boys. He's burning bridges with members of the Hiki tribe by voting against Stephanie. I don't really like where Nate's going right now, but with that said, I do think Nate's a fun personality on the show. I feel like out of the Meat Boys on that tribe, if I were to do my power ranking of the 3, Nate's probably number 1 for me.
That's fair. I mean, I think if you have I guess the opposite of a resume is a litany of failures that's starting to grow even 4 episodes in, that's loser material.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So an honorable mention.
Do you have a dishonorable? Because my honorable is really interesting.
Is your honorable the person that founded the bird?
I didn't say it was unpredictable. I said it was interesting. Don't come for me, Clyde.
Dishonorable, I didn't have one written down. I was going to make up one over the course of the show. And I'll give my dishonorable to animal shots in general.
Okay. Okay.
I used to think that it was a very difficult task, a weight on your shoulders for this podcast. But after doing it once, I realized it's not that tough.
Yeah, when you just make stuff up like you did. But okay, that's fair. Well, to counter that, my honorable mention goes to Mathurin Jacques Brisson, born April 30th, 1723, died June 23rd, 1806. He was a French zoologist and natural philosopher. Interestingly, he became a naturalist basically because he got hired to manage somebody else's natural history collection, right? Collection of rocks and specimens. Got really into it. Surely you've heard of Carl Linnaeus.
I don't think I have.
Really? Okay. Carl Linnaeus, very pioneering cataloger of animal life and of the order of natural life, right? Kingdom, phylum, order, class. That was Carl Linnaeus.
Okay.
Interestingly, Brisson really liked Linnaeus, wrote his own stuff, and then when Linnaeus updated his work, he brought in a ton of Brisson's work. So basically it was this cool little like, oh, you inspired me, and then now you're using my work kind of thing.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is kind of neat. The only other really interesting thing about Brisson is that he eventually abandoned zoology entirely after like 20 years of fixating on it. Switched to physics because this was back in those days when you could just learn all of science in a few years because there wasn't that much, right?
Yeah.
He gets really into physics and essentially devised his own theories of electricity that were opposed to Benjamin Franklin's. And he's like, yeah, this kite and key lightning guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And so kind of hit and miss, but he did catalog the red-footed booby.
I appreciate the historical facts that we're getting in this season.
I'm the true expert.
Yeah, we're appeasing both our marine biologist listeners and our historians. So I'm hoping you're getting all of these exactly correct because I'm just smiling and nodding along. So if you have any facts that are wrong, I'm sure they'll let you know at some point in the future.
Yeah, we'll hear about it. Somebody will let us know. But I think that does it for this one. Let's hope this season picks up the pace. I'll say that. I'd like to see some more exciting boats.
Yeah, I'm ready for the pre-merge to pick up the pace a bit. I'm down for like 2 tribal councils in an episode, like 2 immunities. Like, I'm ready to cut down some of this cast and get to the real central characters.
And it feels like that has to happen, right? There's not that many episodes left, and there's a lot of cast left.
Yeah, there's like 8 or 9 episodes left. So there's still a good chunk of the season remaining, I think. But I feel like we're still early in the pre-merge, but I'm ready for the merge just 4 episodes in.
But we'll power through it, and thank you for joining us to power through it. We're grateful for you, listeners, and follow us at Survivor Analytics wherever you do stuff.
Yeah, catch us next week for another serious episode of the show.